are running crazy with all the construction on campus. So they're the ones that are doing some of the permitting and reviewing like that all of the schools are being built to code, as well as pest control and fire safety fall under them. And then there's research services. So research services has two different directors or associate directors. There's Mark Anthony that is over the hazardous waste team and the lab safety and chemical safety team that we are coming from. And then there's Erica Gonzaga, who's over biosafety and radiation. So we're coming to you from lab safety and chemical safety to talk to you about how to obviously develop an effective safety protocol and standard operating procedure.
My name is Cindy Mercado. I'm the lab safety program manager. We have 5 inspectors in the start of that team. Her background is more chemical background, but she also, when she was doing the PhD, did dive in the biological part.
That was my postdoc.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get started because we prepare a workshop part. So we're gonna run over some slides and explain what is an SOP and give you an overview, but we really want to get the best by you trying to develop an SOP and see where you having struggles so we can help. Okay.
Okay. Maybe. The first side, it didn't work. Maybe because that will work. Oh no, that's not going to work because it's not part of your slides. There you go.
Okay. Awesome. So we're going to give you a little bit of an introduction into what the different components are, but a step-by-step, but basically step-by-step instructions are crucial for most processes and most things that we're doing, whether it be in a laboratory or anywhere else. And standard operating procedures and protocols help with the reproducibility, the efficiency, compliance, and obviously the safety aspects of what we do on a daily basis. However, when they're produced poorly or without all of the information that's necessary, we can run into some problems. And so this is why we thought it would be useful today to talk about how we can make an effective SOP and protocol. So our agenda today is we're going to talk about some of the definitions, and then we're going to give you a few examples of what a good protocol or SOP looks like and what a bad one looks like. And then we're going to give you kind of a practice. So we'll run through like a practical example to give you some insight on how to develop one. So with that in mind, do you think an SOP and a protocol are the same thing? Okay. Raise your hand if you think an SOP and a protocol are the same. What if they're not? Do you think, do we have that time? Okay, oh, lots more people would say not. Cool. Okay, so that is right. They are different. So so basically the terms SOP and protocol are often used interchangeably, especially in a university. We tend to kind of be like, oh yeah, that's our SOP or our procedure is the same. But they're actually 2 different things. And they have slightly different meanings in general. So an SOP is going to have all of the information. A protocol is going to be a subset of that information.
So basically both of them are a set of instructions, but it's a different hierarchy. Okay. So when we're talking about what is the hierarchy of the SOP and the protocol, where they stand. So we say there's a policy right here. That's the top one. So if you go to our EH&S website, we have a policy. Everyone needs to have a chemical hygiene plan. Okay, so we developed the one for the university, and every PI or lab needs to have their lab chemical hygiene plan. So that's the policy. You need to abide by what we need to decide, in this case, the chemical hygiene plan. So then you will have inside that chemical hygiene plan, we're asking you to develop SOP because you're the ones to know your research. I don't know what you're doing. We're here to support your research. So we're asking to do SOP. So what is an SOP? It's the step that employee needs to do in your lab in order to do a specific, to achieve that policy, okay? So then it's the process. So that's how we're going to align the things in your lab to make it happen. And at the bottom is the instruction. So Policy, we're doing the chemical hygiene plan. You're gonna develop your SOP, your operating procedure for your lab that are specific to the equipment that you have, that is specific to the people that you have. So that's the second. Then you have process internally. And the last is the instruction. I want you to do it in this specific bottle that is blue. But your blue, probably your lab is green. So that's where you're gonna put those as specific. Okay? So if we look at the hierarchy, SOP goes in the second, and the protocol is the last one. So it's the more detailed one. So we got that? Okay.
Okay, so basically SOPs are going to be developed for kind of the global view, right? So for a chemical process or a use of a specific instrumentation, like I'm looking at you, Paul, because I think EM, right? I think about how are we going to keep the instrumentation safe while we're collecting our data. So the SOP is going to give us information about the hazards. It's going to give us some general information about that procedure. And then we're going to dive into the protocol where we're going step by step. So what is the exact thing you're going to do? So I'm going to weigh out this, and I'm going to put it in this, and then I'm going to add this solution to this. And that's going to give us that reproducibility and where those points where we can highlight, you know, this is the point where it could be the most hazardous. So we want to be the most focused on this step when we're working in this procedure within this SOP.
And again, we use this term interchangeable. So the SOP protocol is pretty much the same. And we're going to show you at the end of this workshop how we can consolidate and have one thing that got everything. Okay. So feel free to ask any questions. Just stop us so we can really get the grip of this. So there's some SOP questions that I heard you have. So I put it in here. So what is an SOP? And pretty much Katie covered what is an SOP. When is an SOP needed? Why SOPs are important? Who is responsible for the SOP? Where SOP should be kept? And how often SOP should be reviewed? Is that the kind of questions that you have right now? And on others? Okay, so we're gonna dive into that. If we're covering these questions and you think about another one, just feel free to ask. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the first one. And again, can you cover what is an SOP? So I'm gonna cover what is not an SOP. So an SOP is not verbal instructions that you go to a team of a part of your team and say, hey, I need you to do this. It's not an SOP because we cannot repeat exactly the same. So verbal instruction does not go as a definition of SOP. A generic template. So if you go to any university, they will have generic templates. Some are good, some are not that good. Some of ours are good, some are not. So I made that. So we're working on having good templates. So if you download a template and you didn't customize for your operation, for your procedures, for your lab, that's not an SOP. Okay, you can use template, but you need to customize to your information. Information that is not specific or appropriate to your area. So you download that and you keep it the way it is, and you say you will need to use a keyword, but you don't have to keep it in your lab. Or it needs to be done under the biosafety cabinet, and you don't have the biosafety cabinet in your lab. So that really does not help. That's not an SOP. A job safety analysis or a job hazard analysis. That's it. Okay, you are doing these pipetting for 20 times. And the control is 10 minutes. And then go back and do the same. Or do some kind of, other people do it for an hour. So it's only addressing the hazard and the hierarchy of control. That's not an SOP. You're just telling me what are the hazards and how to control. That is just a job hazard analysis or a hazard analysis, but it's not an SOP. You will ask me, Cindy, is that it's part of the SOP? Yes, sure, it's part, but it's not the SOP. Okay. List of chemicals. So if you give me all the chemicals and you tell me these one are toxic, these one are really irritant, these one have health problems, that's not an SOP. You are identify where are your chemicals, you identify what is the hazards, but that's not an SOP. Okay. And that if you go and copy paste all the manufacturer or the vendor's instructions. These need to be used under Q-Hood. That's not an SOP. That's part of the SOP. That's documentation that you use to work to put together your SOP. But you cannot say, I got this strong picture and I put it here and this is my SOP. No, that's part of your SOP. You're missing probably other parts that we're gonna cover how to do it. So if you say to me, I'm gonna use that and I put it like an appendix, that's okay, but it's not an SOP, okay? So what is an SOP? An SOP is a standard operating procedure. It's a set of reasons, so it's not verbal, instructions that will describe the step-by-step process that will be taken to perform a routinary activity and will take into consideration safety. So by you doing that, you're gonna make sure that it's safe and you will have less error. Okay, so when you build your SOP, keep that in mind. When I write this procedure, it makes safe what I'm doing. Someone can understand what I'm writing and can be do multiple times with people not asking the question. If they still need to ask questions, you should review your SOP because something is missing. Okay.
Okay, and so then what do you ask yourself, like, when should we be writing these SOPs? So obviously, hopefully, if you're already in a lab and you're already working, you have them in place already. They may be not as good as you would like them to be, and so that's why you're here. But really, anytime you're starting a new process, so if it's a new chemical that you're gonna be using in a lab, even if it's a similar process to what you've done before, but you're adding some new step, and it's including a particularly hazardous substance, like maybe you have 1 million buffers, but you've never actually put any sodium azide in those buffers to keep things from growing in them. And then you decide there's a protocol you need to do and you're going to add that sodium azide to that buffer. Then you would update your SOP to include that hazard, right? But you can also need them if you get you have a new analysis that you would be doing or a new test you're going, like assay you would be performing. Or a new procedure or process with new equipment. People get new equipment, like we all pray for the money to be able to get new equipment for labs and new ways to analyze our samples. So that would be when you would update or create a new SOP.
According to our website, the EH&S requires when you have hazards, so if you have biologicals, if you have chemicals, if you have a physical hazard, you should develop it. Okay, that's our recommendation on our website. Why they're important? And again, on the bottom, all of that are 11 reasons why they are important. But it takes time because you don't have to explain to your new staff over and over and over. You said after training, it promotes quality, it addresses safety because part of your SOP needs to have a safety component. It's part and it's required by the state and some federal regulatory agencies. It's helped to communicate in your lab what you want to communicate efficiently and consistent. And it also it's part sometimes of audits that you get in your lab or programs. So the SOP is a good tool to have it because it will improve your consistency in your lab, your safety in your lab.
So this is a question I get often. So they're like, Katie, who in the world is supposed to do this? And so they're like, and for a long time, environmental and safety was like, well, the PI, of course, right? It's their lab, they're supposed to be doing it. But the reality is, in some cases, that's not actually the best person to do it, right? So it really needs to be the person with the most knowledge. So if you're bringing a new process to a lab, and that's part of like what you're doing as a postdoc, is like, ooh, I want to bring this process to this lab, so I'm going to hire you as a postdoc so you can bring that process to us. That person is going to be the best person to create that SOP for that new laboratory, right? Of course, we want the PI to review it and to ensure they know what's going on in the lab, or the director, I guess I have to be more specific, the lab manager, somebody who is supervising that laboratory, they need to review it and ensure that they're comfortable with what's happening in the lab. But really, it's anyone who is really confident and knows what's happening within that procedure or that piece of equipment or whatever it happens to be that you're writing the SOP for. And there is like a big long blurb about principal investigators are ultimately responsible, and we all know this. I think hopefully at this point at the university that whoever is the main person, the director, the associate director of a core, the PI of a research lab, those are going to be the people who are ultimately responsible for everything that ever happens into it, good, bad, or indifferent. So we want to make sure that they are signing off on it, they're reviewing it to make sure that they are aware of those problems.
The other question that we also receive is where SOPs should be kept. And I have two answers for this. I really want to see it in the lab so people can reference, so close by, and you can keep it electronically on paper. It's up to you. We don't say how you need to do it, but I would like to see it close to the people who's performing, so if they have a doubt, they can reference, okay? But in our chemical hygiene plan, what are you doing in your latch, okay? You will have this at almost at the end when you're completing your latch. We are requiring that you describe where the SOPs are kept in your lab, okay? So I don't have to see it there. You don't have to load it there, but you need to let me know where it's in the binder, it's in my office, it's near the equipment. So just a line telling me where to get it. If you want to upload it, that's okay, but it's not a requirement from EH&S. I just need to know where it's, okay? Now remember, this is when you're doing your latch, almost at the end, that's why we have all of that part. It has a no section, and that's what we want to know where you have your SOPs. Question regarding this. Okay, you have something to add?
Yeah, just to kind of follow up. So that note section shows up with the roster information on the hazard assessment. So it shows up kind of front and center right on the first page. So it helps your lab know exactly where it is. So most of the time when I see this note, it says, you know, SOPs are kept on Teams, or they're kept on the university shared drive for whatever. So it's pretty easy. I mean, it's pretty easy to do. It's but it makes it where it's accessible to everyone who's on the roster in Gator Tracks. So with that, it's like, well, how often should an SOP be reviewed? How often do I need to like sign off? And generally speaking, we've tried to say annually. EH&S would really like for it to be annual. However, I've also had to feel like there's been 200, you know, there's a binder of 200 SOPs. Katie, I don't have time for all that. Okay, I get it, right? I mean, in the end, I come from the bench. I know what we don't have all this like buckets of time that are just for paperwork. So really what we're asking from you is when the process changes, when you update something, because the procedure is actively a part of your SOP, we want you, if you tweak it where you're like, instead of 30 minutes, we're going to incubate for 35 minutes. We want you to update it and then just make a note, and you'll see kind of what version it is and when it was updated, right? So there's some processes like how to run an SDS page gel. That process really doesn't change. It's kind of the same for now until somebody makes some big breakthrough. But the reality is we don't need you to update that annually. I mean, look through it, make sure there aren't any mistakes or there's something that you want to like update. If there's a typo, whatever it is, there's a new step that's missing that you want to add for it. But we're not asking you to review 50,000 protocols annually, but as necessary, and just keep it up to date, right? It's you. Oh, it's still me. My bad. How? I did that. No. Oh, my bad. Oh, okay. So how to write an SOP, right? So this is, if you start from scratch, it's a little bit challenging, but there are plenty of templates. We offer them. You're going to see kind of a newer version that's different from what you will find on our website today, that we kind of decided is a little bit easier for, even in this case, to just simplifies everything and makes it sort of more to the point. However, we have a biological SOP template. We have chemicals and animals, because sometimes that's a two-step process. I know for IACA, they require both. So that's typically the best way. Obviously, if you're doing it electronically, you don't have to worry about whether or not it's readable or legible.
But there is the aspect of making sure that if, for example, English isn't your first language, that it's edited by somebody so that everyone understands exactly what's happening.
And usually, sorry, Katie, when we develop these trainings, it's in our team, we try to find persons who got that background that can help. But then we pass that to the whole team to review, to read it, to see if your knowledge can be transferred to that paper that I can easily follow. So again, if you use our template and you think there's areas that can be improved, send us an email. We're more than welcome because we're sharing with the whole US community, and our website is free, so everyone can download that template. So if you feel there's some SOP that you're using and can be improved, shoot us an email. We will be more than welcome to update it because we try to put a lot of effort. That's it's not our primary role, but we wanted to have it available, and we're a little bit slow putting it in the website, but we're working to have more available. So again, it's not our primary, but we want to have these tools for you guys or anyone who need it. And if you develop one that you think it's awesome and we can publish, we're more than welcome to put in our web too.
Yeah, well, for example, I'm working on a template for a hydrochloric acid program that we're about to launch. And so I wanted my colleagues in biotechnology who have limited knowledge and probably zero experience ever working with it to go over the protocol to make sure it was easy enough to understand if you had no experience. But then we also sent it to a focus group of users so that we weren't, we weren't doing things that maybe were inconsistent with the protocols they were already using. So obviously we don't expect you to like exhaustively distribute your SOPs, but even if just within your groups, you circulate it so everyone is one on the same page, but two can kind of notice the comma that you forgot, right? I mean, sometimes even those things are useful.
Is there a library of SOPs?
We do.
We're working on them. I noticed, so like the example we're using is DNA gel electrophoresis. But like I think we have one that just says gel electrophoresis, and the problem for me with that one is that it's almost too inclusive because it's including protein and DNA, and there are different hazards associated with those two procedures, and there are similarities in how it works, how the theory behind it, if you will, but the chemicals don't match up. So you have a list of hazards that you may or may not have, so that it becomes less effective in my
we do have some templates, and what I'm gonna do is before we go to the exercise or what you're preparing for the exercise, I can put it in there so you know exactly where is our website. Did that make sense? Okay. Yes. So let's move up of what is the SOP format. I know Katie and me mentioned what is the format. Again, it's a structure. But the structure will vary of the lab. Academics use very different structure of the industry. I come from industry, and they're very rigid with their structure. They want to see this areas in some parts. We're more flexible with that because we know research and academics is different. So we're trying to develop stuff. So when we're going to complete all the areas. So that's why Katie mentioned that the ones that we're going to use for today practice, it's very different from the one that we have in our website. But we're going to have these templates available also because we figured out it's more easy, understandable to use, and we're always going to migrate everything to these formats because it's more easy. Just when you're selecting an SOP format, consider that you're creating. Why are you creating? Again, we're academics, so we should be a little bit more flexible. That's why I don't really fall in love with the one that we were using because it's very, very rigid. So I think this one will be better for adapting for different situations. And then back up one.
Oops.
And then the level of detail, if you are the person who wants to know what are you using. It's only for compliance that I don't recommend it's only for compliance. But if you're using for training, I would encourage you that put as much as details as you need because you're using it for training. So you can handle this to a person and say, can you read it? I go over once you read it and tell me where you're not comfortable to follow these 10 days. Okay. So if you can put pictures, that it is possible, just put pictures in your SOP. Again, our SOP, that's more a work instruction, a protocol, but these, this template that you have in your folders will allow to put those pictures there, okay? Because we're trying to consolidate the SOP and the work instructions in here. So that's the beauty of this one. And again, we recommend that you use, if you don't know where to start, I don't want you to start looking all the university, which one will be used. You can, if you have the time, but we are trying to have a big library. We have a couple, so we encourage if there's any other chemicals that you're using, or biological, or any IACO specific template, that you start from there, so you don't have to create your own one. And again, we're partnering with IACO, looking for what is the most common SOP that you ask, so we can create those templates. Okay, so we're working in having 3 more in the chemical area, and like 6 that IACO suggest that is the most common of people who are using this. So again, we are expecting to have that soon. I cannot promise it's gonna be by the end of the year, but something close. So now I'm gonna go over some of the good and bad examples of SOP. Again, what I found is that what is a common problem with SOP? Missing or missing SOP is the worst. We don't have any SOPs in the, we just go verbal. So that's the worst. When you have that, probably it's missing or it's contradictory. You say, don't do, you need to do this, but in practically when you go in the lab, you don't do that technique. So that's a common error. So that's what I'm saying. Once you finish writing your SOP, pass it and make sure that's what you're doing in your lab. The other thing is that you don't follow because they're too complicated. And that's what Katie was saying, that we try to have other people that does not do this and does not know this chemical, so they can give feedback. I don't understand what you're saying here. You're saying foreign and then I don't know what it is. And in that case, we add a picture or we have something for clarification. And then when I'm saying not reflecting the current practice, so you decide this is not what I'm going to do, but it's still in writing, and that's what you're saying you're doing. And the last one, it's not being used or it has not been revised. So again, the SOP is useless at that point. So for the SOPs are not sufficiently descriptive, are written without the input of the employees or your lab staff, and they're updated. That's the most common problems that we have with Berlin. As we were building this training, I asked Angel to send us some of the SOPs, and I guess this was one template that was much before me, so I didn't know this exists, to be honest. And Katie said to me, Cindy, that was when we first started. So this is not an SOP. So you have this in your lab. This does not meet the definition of an SOP. You can see on the top it says standard operation procedure for activity, and it said running electrophoresis gel. And it just mentioned all the chemicals that you're gonna use, all the hazard classifications, so they're toxics, they're carcinogenic, they're flammables, all the health hazards, so everything that can happen when you use those chemicals. And then the only thing that it's talking about is your engineering controls on your PPE. And then what? So where's the step-by-step process? It's completely missing. So that's probably what you're using in your lab. That's not an SOP. This just only let me identify what chemicals I'm using and what are the health hazards. It's part of an SOP? Yes. Did that constitute an SOP? No. Okay? Another university, I'm not saying which university it is that have an SOP. Again, it doesn't, this is more a fact sheet because it doesn't have step by step. So how to use the nitric acid, the only thing is explaining what PPE is required and what are the housekeeping and the engineering controls. So there's no step by step how to use it, so it's not an SOP. The next one, good SOPs are concise, detailed, clear, easy to understand, review and approved by someone, and update on a regular basis. Good example of SOPs. This is from another university. It's a good example of a nitric acid one. So we got a description, and since it's a template, it leaves a space for the lab to customize how they use this nitric asset, explain the potential hazard, engineer controls, give you options like I mentioned in there. If you don't have a fuel hood, then you can now put that as a measurement and what you're gonna use. So it's a template that you need to adapt. Okay, if you can continue. So we have a certification area, who approved this, who did a review, what is, and you need to update it. And training, so it's customizable. And you got all the parts that we are asking that you have a good answer. This is our version of the nitric acid. Again, it's asking you, is it a procedure or experiment? The description, how you're gonna use it, so you need to fill out that part. So we did the other part for you, but you need to fill out that. We identify what are some of the hazards. We give the engineering controls there. So we say this is a fuel hood. If you're not using it a fuel hood, then you should consult with us what will be the necessary precaution for engineering controls. The PPE that we suggest, you can always be stronger, but not less than that. The step-by-step is where you're gonna customize these steps. We have the transportation and how to store it, the waste disposable, and we already did the waste determination for you in here. The emergency procedure, and again, you need to customize your information. So our templates will look like this in their website. You can use it. If you don't have something listed, just control what can I do to address that.
Sorry about that.
So now we can jump to the practice exercise. We put in your package a template, okay? And what we want to do is work in a group so we can work these out.
So for the sake of time, we color coded each of your folders. On the front cover, you can find one of these colors. So it will be orange, yellow, red, blue, green, or gray. And so just for the sake of time, we're going to assign each of you